Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Just Two Dads with my co-host and partner, Mr. Sean Francis. I am Brian Altunian. Today, we get to celebrate the most important profession, my personal opinion, the most important profession in the world, that because constantly it's a thankless position, and it's also one that seems to be under fire a lot, and yet it is so critical. And so we're going to be talking about education and teachers, but not just your standard teacher in the classroom. Our guest today has phenomenal experience in guiding special needs families through the entire process of IEPs and education, and she comes with a wealth of knowledge and background, and we're excited for our guest, Jada Golden, today on this episode of Just Two Dads. So here we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode number 141 of Just Two Dads. I am Brian Altunian, along with my good friend. We have shared a lot of stuff, me and Mr. Sean Francis, over the course of the last several years. We started this podcast almost exactly 3 years ago. We're almost at our 3-year anniversary. Yeah, which is pretty exciting. If you do the math, if you know how to math. Somebody used math as a verb the other day. If you know how to mathesize this, you would think 52 weeks in a year, we should be at 156. We're at 142. That's just how Sean and I roll. We make up our own math along the way. So anyways, episode number 141. This is going to be it's going to be fun. I have not had my coffee yet, so I'm probably going to be drinking some coffee throughout. I want to thank you if you're catching us live on Facebook. Thank you for joining us. Leave some comments. If we can, we'll put them up on the screen. And if you're catching us after the fact on our YouTube channel, Just Two Dads, thank you for joining us. Please subscribe and share with your friends. And if you're hearing us on Google Podcasts or any podcast outlets, including Google, thank you for making us part of your listening day. And to our family and friends down in the U.S. Virgin Islands, WSTX AM radio, welcome and thank you again. If any of you want to reach out to us and send us emails about topics or somebody that we've had on the show before or people that you think we should interview, please send us an email at wearejusttwodads@gmail.com. We made it kind of simple. 2 is spelled out, TWO. We are just two dads at gmail.com. I probably should put that on the screen, right? We are just two dads at Gmail. There. How about that? Oops. I almost switched it over. There it is. My mail is now. Thank you, Sean. I'm going to put it up on the screen. Anyways, without further ado, today's conversation, I'm excited to be here, to be hearing from Jada and the work that she does. Because it is more than just education. It's using education as a background to inform and educate parents and family members with special needs family members about the entire process. And not only that, but if for those who are teaching or interested in teaching or being involved at a teacher level for special needs learners, Jada has phenomenal material that she offers to teachers who are interested in knowing more and how to get involved in that. So I'm fired up about today's conversation, even without my coffee. Just wait, Jada, because when that coffee kicks in, it's going to be crazy. So without further ado, I'm going to throw it over to Sean. I had somebody tell me the other day, man, your intro is way too long. I didn't have time to listen because I was in the car. And by the time you're done introducing yourselves, I stopped listening. So I'll shut up now, and I'm going to throw it over to Sean, who will give you a little background on Jada, and then we're going to get this thing rolling. Hey, Sean, how you feel, buddy?
I'm feeling good.
I know you're well rested.
Yeah. That I am. We talk about, we talked about the intro. Our intros are, kind of long. I'll make it really short. Brian made that comment about me being well rested because, it's funny how your challenges and your gifts can sometimes come in the same package. So those that have autism, especially boys, bodies produce less melatonin. So therefore erratic sleep pattern is a regular part of life. Also, what is a regular part of life for many people is anxiety about going to the dentist. Elijah has a dentist appointment today, but his problem last night is that he couldn't get to sleep because he's actually excited to go to the dentist. His dentist is amazing, which she works fantastic with people with sensory issues. We're trying to get her on the show for some time. But anyway, I'm thankful, blessed, and excited to have our guest on the show today, and I want to give her the proper introduction on her credentials and everything, but she's so much more than just simply an educator. She's originally from Boston, Massachusetts. She's established her independent practice here in Los Angeles recently, just in January 2023, although her professional experience goes much further back than that. She's licensed in early childhood, ESL, special education with national certification in dyslexia intervention and parent advocacy. But I could go on about the titles, but who she is as a person is more impressive than any of those things. As a matter of fact, those things work together. And we've actually just met, yet I can say that with the utmost confidence. So welcome to Just Two Dads, Jada Golden.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. I feel like talking to you both on the podcast will be just as fulfilling as all our conversations that we have off the podcast.
Great.
Yes, I am new to LA. I never thought that I would live on the West Coast. I do hail from Massachusetts. You said you wanted me to just share about how I grew up a bit, or what led to
yeah the way we usually begin the show by I don't know if we like to say don't know if you see yourself as a hero. We feel that the work you do is heroic, and all heroes have superpowers, and the superpowers come from their origin. So tell us a bit about yourself, how and who you grew up with, and everything that makes you who you are.
Now you're already making me tear up, because I am very, very grateful for my career and my influences and my mentors. I do reflect a lot on how I got to where I am today, often because I joke, but I'm also not joking, as I believe that the teacher gods are always looking out for me, and they have put me on a path to be an educator, because I have always, always, always wanted to be a teacher since first grade. I used to write about it in every year in elementary school about being a teacher, and I would play teacher. Yes.
I want to just say one thing for those that are listening. Then, but as you get ready to go into, I'm really getting the impression that too long a story to get into exactly how we met, how this interview came to be, but there's a high level of serendipity that's taking place. We talked about my sleep or lack thereof earlier. I was telling Jada, I had a dream last night where I got this overwhelming sensation that anything, and it applies to everyone, but everything that you're looking for, and you've heard it before, but everything that you're looking for is inside of you. And then Jada made a comment about, as a teacher, mentor, leader, or coach, she believes that you should bring out that which is already in someone, and that the classroom should help facilitate that. So that mindset, you don't just necessarily come out the womb with it. Let's get back to where those things came from. My appreciation for that is so deep. Let's go.
Yes. I was telling you before we became live is one of my greatest philosophies and passions and practices as a classroom teacher, or even when I'm working with families and students one-on-one, is to create an environment that students, that their natural skills and talents are evoke. I evoke those out of them. I help them cultivate their unique, one-of-a-kind, invaluable talents and skills that they can contribute to our world, and that not only benefits society, but helps them develop their own identity. So much of formal education is indoctrinating students with information. And yes, I do believe a lot of formal education can be very beneficial and necessary, but it's not everything. And I don't think that it should be what grades a student, if this is an A student or a B student, on how much information they can retain. I don't think that is the majority of what makes a great student. But yes, I always knew I wanted to be a teacher, and I was always involved in high school and such, jobs that related to kids, whether it was summer camp counselor, babysitting, things of that nature. However, I never, ever expected that I would be in special education. I just remember, and not because I wanted to play classroom, I wanted, 20 students and to do all the little classroom things. So I really felt very strongly that I was going to be a general educator. I would always say that. But one of my jobs early in my life when I was 20 was working at a community center right outside of Boston. And I worked there for 4 years as the lead after school teacher. And there was a child, this was back in I'm going to be aging myself. This is back in, I think the year is important because we can see how the internet has evolved the information that we have available when it comes to special education.
Mhm.
So this was in the year 2000. Yes, this was,
Okay.
I remember because it was before 9/11. The year 2000, I had a student in the family said, you know, at the time, this might be a bit outdated, but they said, oh, he's has mild Asperger's. At the time, that was the word that they were using. And no one knew what that was. You couldn't Google it. There was no information. And so it was all just figuring out what was best for this student. This very
it was like a diagnosis from a doctor, and they were just
Yes.
mimicking because they didn't really know exactly what it was.
You couldn't Google it. I went to the library. The library didn't have any books. I mean, it was fascinating. And then what happened is suddenly, you know, I had a lot of successes with this student. The family started having me as their babysitter. But then there was another family in this class whose mother was a psychologist and whose daughter was in my class. And one time she asked me to babysit, and I babysat, and she had this 8 hours of VHS tapes, again, aging myself, VHS tapes of autism spectrum. It said autism spectrum focused on high functioning autism and Asperger's syndrome. And I said, what? And so I asked her if I could borrow the tapes. I digested all 8 hours of it. And then she said, you know, I love the way I see how you work with this student. Would you like to come interview at our school at McLean Hospital for students that are on the spectrum? And at the time, I hadn't even finished. I was in community college because I always had to work. So I always worked while I was in school. And they hired me as a classroom assistant teacher. And I worked there for 2 full years. Phenomenal. I learned from the best doctors. I got to sit in IEP meetings. I got to help the teachers create these individual programs. I had the state-of-the-art knowledge. They paid for me to finish my associate's degree. It was just... It was the best experience. I'm still very close with all of those people. Very, very, very close. And then from there, I went to Simmons College in Boston that I think has one of the best, the best special education master's in science programs. And so I finished my undergrad there, and that's where I did my special ed program. And, you know, I have to say, in the field of special education, I think it would be wonderful, you know, in our culture in the United States, we really focus when teachers are applying for jobs, you give them your resume. However, I think it's very valuable if administrators did ask for a CV, because every special education program is so different. Mine, I think, there was one thing lacking, and I'll just say it, you know, I think they could have done a far better job on teaching us how to work with different cultures. That, and I wrote a paper in my graduate program about that. But other than that piece, we had to take a special ed law class, and it was the hardest class ever. And I realized why I'm not a lawyer, because it was so boring, you know, the style of learning, which I'm sure lawyers can relate to. A lot of studying and decoding the meaning of things, but I loved the knowledge it gave me. You know, today I can very confidently say I might not know all the answers to a law, but I certainly know how to find them and how to apply them and what questions to ask a school, etc. Even moving from state to state, moving from Massachusetts to California, those are different laws. And so I was fascinated also that I was excited to have to brush up my skills and say, okay, do the same laws apply here as they do in Massachusetts? And I would even have to be very frank with families saying, you know, my training is from back East law. So I might need, you know, I have to do some more research before I tell you if this is something that you can do here. And excuse me, the other coolest piece actually about my master's in science program was we also had to take it was just called assistive technology. And we had to, again, this is back in 2006. The professor used to speak at the Apple conference every year on special education technology. So she, you know, was like the Apple guru, and she was my teacher. And we had to design these programs of, you know, you had to pick any type of learning difference and say, okay, now what is I want you to imagine technology that hasn't even been invented yet. What does this child need to be their best selves, you know? So
Yeah.
I had a great foundation in that. From there, another thing I also just want to touch on is the community center that I worked at, the after school program. I also worked in their arts camp. So I did a lot of different things. And I was the teacher that I wasn't a teacher yet, but I was the instructor that they always gave kids that had a special need, from severe needs where they had a full-time aide and the student was
It
not.
just fit that way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I mean, no offense to my art teacher friends, but so many of the different art instructors would say, oh, no, they can't come in my class. We're using clay, or no, it's chalk. I was the photography teacher. Again, dating myself, but we had real dark rooms. I was in the dark in a small space with chemicals, and I said, bring them to my class. Come on, you. I had all these kids with the special needs, and my favorite part of it was not seeing the phenomenal art they created, but with my students that did not have special needs, they were these model peers, you know. And
right.
I would my greatest thing I love doing is taking away the stigmas. You know, I love creating classroom community, and I really strongly believe that every child belongs in the classroom. There might be a time or place, you know, where a student doesn't do well in the classroom, and there could be even a severe case if a student is cognitively aware of the negativity they're bringing. You might have to say, hey, you know, you need to spend some time over here. But I don't like the separation, you know, teaching children, oh, you're different, you can't learn with us, is so backwards, because all that is now they don't know how to engage with that child, that human, as an adult.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I have two questions for you, and I'm going to ask them separately. The first one, a couple of beats back, you mentioned that in addition to a resume, a prospective teacher should have to present a CV.
Yes.
You need to let us know. The first question is, and let us know what a CV is.
Sure. You know, I forget what the words stand for, but it's what the European and South American countries use when applying. So what it does is it says every class that you've taken.
Oh, so it gives detail in your education, not just your degree. Okay, fantastic. Exactly. Okay,
because good. For example, another class that I had to take that I fell in love with was diagnostic assessments. So not only were we formally trained in diagnostic assessments, we also had to create our own, which is huge, because you can be a full-time learning specialist in a public or private school, and they say, hey, go do the Woodcock-Johnson, and you might not be certified in that, so you don't understand the efficacy of how you ask those questions. You know,
exactly. Great.
You know, and I have this conversation. And before I had my degrees in education, I kind of also fell under that umbrella where, like, oh, I'm already a teacher, I know what I'm doing. But there are so many we're at a place in education where especially in the private sector, where you don't necessarily always need a license to have a position, is I really feel very strongly in the teacher preparation programs. Where you go to school for your teacher training does make a difference. It doesn't mean that you can't do a phenomenal job at your job, but if you don't have that formal training, I highly encourage your administrators or yourselves to get those trainings, because there's so much knowledge already developed, and it's not fair for the student or families to waste their time and not having all of those boxes checked, saying, okay, I know what I'm doing, even if I learn the formal way and then make it my own, which is what I do often. You know, I don't always just stick to what I've learned. I add to that. I really encourage, teachers and administrators, get those teacher trainings.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So my other question is this. This was a comment and question. It's very common for people that come on the show as guests to offer, you know, just have this inclusive mindset. Anyone that is going to get into special education usually has that anyway.
Right.
I think that yours, especially where it comes from, is worth sharing, because especially when you mentioned because I didn't know if I would bring this up then if it would
Sure.
matter, but you brought it up in our conversation when we were first getting to know each other.
Right.
But your desire for cultural inclusion.
Yes.
I want you to talk about where that comes from, especially as it relates to how you present. And my reason for that is because I'm saying this for a reason. Elijah is 17 years old, diagnosed with autism at the age of 3. Yep. Elijah, we've been blessed with good experiences. I did not even think, as a Black man, as an African American, how that played a role in how he would be received as one on the autism spectrum until he was at least 10 years old, because I didn't have any experience that led me to think that that might have anything to do with it.
Right.
Up to that point. But anything that differentiates us, or that people think differentiate us, is as important as that which brings us together. So tell us a little bit about that, your experience, and why that's so important to you. And I appreciate it.
And also, just to touch more on about what you just said in your specific experience, is I obviously am not a Black man. However, I think there is another layer of awareness that is needed for like your son who's on the spectrum, because if he is out in public, he might not be received as, oh, he's on the spectrum, right? So already without the diagnoses, you might be in situations where you are going to be presumed to be doing something that you're not doing. But then when you're on the spectrum, it's even harder, because our students that are on the lower end of the spectrum, or they have higher needs, they need a person with them to always kind of buffer that communication, and say, oh, let's communicate with him differently. He processes information differently. So yes, my background, Jada Golden. My mother is Black. My dad is white. Which I joke with my family all the time, is I'm clearly on the lighter end of the branch of the tree. But I feel like I grew up in incredibly diverse environments, even though my elementary school from kindergarten through 5th grade was predominantly white. We lived in a predominantly white suburb at the time. And
Boston's not known for diversity.
No, it's not. It's not. But it's fascinating because, but my mother, when she saw how white I was when I came out, my mother instinctively just, my whole life was like, well, you come from a Black family, and, these are the things you're going to see and you're going to face. And it just was instilled with me. And she very naturally was really good at preparing me for that, and how different people receive different cultures, and say, in saying, well, if you experience like racism, or you see it, or you hear it, like, those white people, they just don't know how to think yet. Like, she was really good at not hiding truths from me, but not hurting my like self-esteem or sadness, because it can be so tricky with kids so many times.
It's delicate. You can prepare someone for disappointment, and if you're good at that, then you become good at crippling them too and making them victims. It's a balance.
And it's what I encourage teachers to do is, yes, it's delicate, but that doesn't mean to avoid those conversations. And I think that's the tricky thing, is like, so often teachers, because I struggled with this, is you don't want to crush the baby's spirits by telling them certain things about our history, and just so many horrible things that have happened. So timing is everything, but I think the most important thing is to create a space where students feel comfortable enough to have those conversations, So I grew up in a diverse family, even besides my mom's family being Black and my dad's family being white. A lot of my aunts and uncles have married people from different cultures. So I have cousins of all different ethnicities. Brazilian, Filipino, et cetera, et cetera. So I have a very diverse background, and I'm very grateful for that. Super grateful. I think I've always been super aware of different cultures. In fact, whatever culture I'm teaching in, they always think I'm part of it. So I worked at an all Jewish program once, and the Orthodox families thought I was Orthodox because of the way I think and I learned this in the classroom. I learned this at a class in community college, an early childhood classroom training class, where the teacher was great at saying, teaching us to be aware that what is culturally appropriate in one culture is not in another. So before thinking that a student is being disrespectful or shy, assess what their values are in their culture before assuming things. So just to have that awareness and create a space that anything can come your way.
Well, you're curious. You're
Amazing.
curious. You remain curious, and that's the answer to everything. Go ahead, Brian.
Let me ask you a question. So
Yep.
my daughter Jordan is tuning in and watching, and I'm proud of her. She just first of all, she had IEP from the time she was in kindergarten through high school, and she just graduated with a degree and a bachelor's degree in educational studies, and is a special needs educator now.
Right.
She's looking at her master's degree and where to go next. She actually asked, are there schools that you recommend, that do online, any online classes or to support teachers in the special needs area?
Yes, I have. So Simmons does have an online program now. Simmons University in Boston, Massachusetts. I highly recommend it. There's another one out of, it's like either Kansas or Iowa, but Brian, I will email you also.
Perfect.
But I recommend Simmons University. And I think the biggest thing is whatever program you look at, ask what their required classes are. And if you look like that's going to cover all of your interests, that's the one to do. Another great one is to find a program, a special education master's program that allows you to get multiple license and certifications all in one. Get your bang for your buck. That's what I did is when I was enrolled in the moderate disabilities program. So under that, it's also all about your practicum placement. Make sure you get a practicum placement at a phenomenal school with a phenomenal teacher, and that allows you to get in those practicum hours under different licenses. So when in my one master's program, I was able to get my inclusion license that allowed me to teach in the general ed setting because everybody needs inclusion now. I was able to get my special ed license, and I also took the practicum in their Masters of Reading certification because you have some wiggle room of extra classes. So it's a lot of work, but I highly encourage any special educator that wants to find the right program, see how much you can get out of that experience.
That's awesome. That's hugely valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me ask you another question. And it's sort of a two-part question, but it involves, so you moved from Boston to Los Angeles. So A, I'm curious why. B, California is considered a pretty progressive state when it comes to the services and resources available.
Right.
How does that relate to, because I think Massachusetts is probably pretty progressive as well, if I remember correctly.
It's
how do they compare?
I think Boston in a lot of ways is on top of their game when it comes to the quality of education. That is one thing I loved about Massachusetts, the teaching hospitals, the school systems, everything, the quality of work. My first year teaching in a Boston public school, it was an early childhood center, but it was Boston Public. And that founding principal was Miss Valerie Gooms, and who also was originally a special educator. But we had to do so much work in such a thorough way. If our students tested low at their end of year scores, the benchmarks, the state tests, we had to meet that summer and talk about what were the gaps. I don't know any other school ever that said, okay, let's look at those tests. Oh, 30% of them all missed this section. Then what curriculum, what are we going to do to fill that gap for the next students?
Mm-hmm.
It's very rigorous, which was exhausting, but phenomenal. And I just learned so much. And, kind of any other school I've worked at since then felt easy. I forget what you were asking me. Oh, so the difference between teaching. Yeah. So the way I ended up, so I love classroom teaching. I actually have a dream about classroom teaching. I would say at least every other week. I really do. It's very vivid because I'm not currently in the classroom. I love it. It is my first love. I've had tremendous success and wonderful experiences being a classroom teacher. However, I cannot tip my hat to the system. The system does drain teachers. It exhausts us. Some, not everyone, there are those teachers that still have all their hair in the right place and their clothes are ironed and they're at year 15. I don't know how they do it. But it's exhausting. And the way I ended up in California is after 6 very successful years in Boston, I resigned to start my own practice there because I was so exhausted from the system. Because this was the other problem. This is what's also scary is when you have a lot of skills. I had 3 licenses, national certification. I had all these things. And the more successes that I kept having, the more they kept moving me around. So I couldn't. It is not fun to have to move your entire classroom out of the classroom into your 1-bedroom apartment every summer because they want to move you across town in the fall. It was exhausting and I didn't see that. And it's funny, it almost still happens in my career. And principals would always try to sell me the same spiel. Well, you're the only one that can do this, Jada. I need you to do this. We need you here. We need you here. Oh, you got the highest benchmarks for first grade Black males last year in the district. Okay, well then we're moving you across town. So now you have a 45-minute drive instead of a 15-minute drive. All these kind of things that were exhausting, And it was also great. My second year in Boston Public, I was a second-year teacher, and I got chosen to have an exhibit of my classroom and my teaching philosophy at the Children's Museum. I have to contribute the head of school at the time, Valerie Gooms, because she set that up. That's when I worked at the Haynes EEC in Roxbury, Massachusetts, a wonderful early childhood center that she started for Boston Public. But that was really exciting. I had just all these great successes, but the more accolades I was getting, I felt like the less autonomy I had. I really, really do. And
you'd say it's like you're having success, but it lacked fulfillment.
Yes.
And it's funny, Brian.
Students. Yeah. I couldn't make any decisions for myself. They say, okay, now we're going to put you in that classroom over there. And now we're going to do this and this and this and this, and then I'm working also. So I'm in all these different Boston public schools that I kept getting moved to. Yeah. And not all the admin was on top of their game. Everyone's overworked, overtaxed, overstressed. And the one thing, I knew I had to resign when I was no longer allowed to do what's best for the babies. It was too much. It was everything was so fear driven.
Very administrative handy. Yeah.
Yes, especially the schools that didn't. They're called like turnaround schools or innovation schools, whatever term the district is giving, saying that's a low performing school, so we need to watch them. So those schools that I'd be moved to, because I can fill those gaps, there's also so much less autonomy, and principals are afraid to do what's wrong because they're going to be checked every week. Is the classroom teacher following the curriculum on day 2? And it was just, I don't mind working hard, but my wings were so clipped. It was nonsense. And I did not make a decision to resign until consulting my mentors. By the way, I had the best mentors in all of the city of Boston, Dr. Teresa Perry, who wrote Young, Gifted, and Black. She was an amazing mentor of mine who sought me out at this event. I just love her. Hi, Teresa. I miss you and love you. And but she was the one that said, when she saw what I was going through and it was just insanity and it was just tears. And she was like, Jada, you are changing the narrative. You are not condoning the broken system, and that is okay. You will. And
that's
she was
fantastic.
Yes.
That's great.
Yes.
Go ahead.
And it was amazing. And then she said something to me that it was just all the affirmation I needed, because I always say that the teacher gods are looking out for me. And she said, the teacher gods are looking out for you. And I didn't share that terminology with anyone else. So I was like, yes. And then that's
fantastic.
Yeah. And then she introduced me to my other mentor that gave me the okay to move to California. And that was Mel King. I don't know if he just passed away this year at the age of, was it 98, 97? Phenomenal mentor of mine. I love him so much. He wrote this wonderful book called Love is the Question and the Answer. And
I know that title.
Yeah, he's amazing. We can talk about him forever. I miss him. I have conversations with him. He is in the heavens now. But he was a huge support to me and my practice. He would give me spaces to use in Boston to host my own literacy workshops because I was outside of the system, just my own private thing.
Wow.
I did a lot of workshops through the South End Technology Center and other spaces that he would connect me to and just say, this is Jada. You guys need her. Give her the space. That's that.
Brian and I talk a lot. So I think I explained this to you. You may know, our listeners know, Brian and I met working in financial services together and then coming together to launch an initiative that would build a bridge between financial service and education and the special needs community. And so anyone that dares to turn their passion into serving the community into a business, we commend them, and we try to, give any, experience that we might have in that area. And so we commend you for doing that, because that's not an easy thing to do. You on one hand, you realize you're being limited, but I think one of the two things that get either overrated or underrated, bless you, is that people will talk about, grinding it out and becoming an entrepreneur as though it is for everybody. A steady check is not to be sneezed at. People like to say, a job is just over broke, create your own future. Not everyone's meant to be an entrepreneur,
right?
And it's a scary thing. But you, like Brian was asking, you did that. You then moved to California. So tell us how you got it, because you started in San Francisco, then came to Los Angeles.
Yeah. So even this is what's funny is I always knew I was going to be a teacher. On my father's side of the family, many of them are entrepreneurs. And so when I was wanting to go to college to become a teacher, my dad and his dad, my grandfather, were like, no. My dad didn't even, and I mean this this is a good thing because he became very successful, but my father did not graduate high school even, but had his own business and very successful. And my dad was like, wait, you're going to pay someone else for your time to and my grandfather was like, you need to be an entrepreneur, like entrepreneur. And I remember that was indoctrinated in me. I had no idea how, I didn't know when, but I just remember telling myself, I am going to make education entrepreneurial because I love being a teacher, and I couldn't shake that passion. Although this time of year, it is not, me and my other teacher friends are like, are we really going to go into teaching again this year, or should we go make money? Which one should we do? But it's that pull. I love it. I love. The only time I don't like going to work is when I was in a system that clipped my wings.
You had no control.
No control. And I don't mind following lead. Like, I can take orders, and I love learning from other people and following the rules. But there's a difference between following the rules and having your spirit crushed.
For sure.
And being under a fear-driven mindset, and I am very grateful that I was raised to be very, very, very accountable. And again, I'm only sharing this because I know that he wouldn't mind, but my father, who was a recovering alcoholic, because he went through AA, he taught us that same type of accountability, you make a mistake, you own it. Like, don't waste your time trying to hide it or lie it or, where, yes, it's uncomfortable, own it. So he just raised us in that mindset. In fact, he raised us from age 3 to 12, I went to AA meetings with him every week. So I was just in this kind of accountable mindset. Just be accountable,
Yeah.
Be accountable.
Yeah.
And walk your walk, own your nonsense. If you make a mistake, you own it, you talk it out, you move it, you keep it moving. It was also him. I always said he and my mom gave me a huge foundation in my career, because another huge focus of my pedagogy and practice is trauma resilience, and using play as the center of my practice. I'm a huge advocate for not only healing trauma in children, but preventing it. And this is again, all the alignment I had, this is from the teacher gods, is my first day as a licensed teacher in Boston Public, the week before the students come back. My first day, the founding educator of that school, Valerie Gooms, hired what at the time was called Project Joy to come in and teach and train us to be playmakers, which is where everything we're doing is so play focused that when they bump up against those potentially traumatic situations, it bounces right off of them. If if the kid calls you ugly on the playground, you don't have a meltdown. You can say, hey, that's not true. I think I'm kind of cute. You know, that type of mentality. So instead of having to fix trauma, we're preventing it. Now they're called the Life is Good Playmakers. They're amazing. They paid for our trainings. But again, this principal was just always one step ahead in Boston. She was from Boston. Yeah. She worked for our community. It was wonderful. It was the most diverse school I've ever worked in. It was completely transparent. Is, you know, this is a public school, which we still say the education today in America is predominantly by white females, right? So, or at least there are educators of every walk of life, trained, amazing teachers, but they either don't get hired at the rate that white teachers do, or they don't stay in it because of the things they experience. I know this, you know, I talk to these teachers a lot. And so also I encourage administrators, listen, if you're saying you're only getting white applicants, then you need to expand your network. You need to ask yourself, why is that all that you're seeing? Because there are teachers of every skill out there. Yeah, find them. They're there. If they're not applying to your school, you need to ask yourself why. And let
me ask you. So
we haven't figured out how she got to California.
That's what I was going to say. I wanted to go back to that. I wanted to go back to that with further context, because as you're saying all these things about Boston, I'm thinking, I'm realizing, wait a minute, I'm going to ask the question again, but I just realized it would be easier and on paper make more sense to launch a business in Boston where you have a home and people know of your passion and your success. What makes you go from there to San Francisco?
Well, again, it's funny because I noticed these things that I said about myself. I didn't, and then I just put them in the universe and I don't even think about them. And then I noticed they come about. So for example, when I would tell myself when I started becoming a teacher, I'm like, I need to make this entrepreneurial. I didn't know how, I didn't know when. Mostly the only way I did that was like tutoring on the side because I had the dyslexia training. And then I also, when my fathers and brothers migrated out to San Francisco after my grandfather passed like 15 years ago, I had this more of a connection in the Bay because that's where my dad's family's from. So I would kind of joke saying, oh, I'm going to be a bi-coastal teacher. Yeah, I'm going to do stuff there and here, not knowing when or how. I was out visiting my dad and brothers in the summer of 2016. I think and I had already been working for myself for a year in Boston. And I was out there visiting, and I also am obsessed with touring schools. I love researching schools. I want to visit every school because then I can know what to recommend to families. I know what's missing. I know what's that, because my elementary school, Happy Hollow Elementary School in Wayland, Massachusetts, was the most advanced school I've ever been in yet. And this was in the 80s. It was amazing. Happy Hollow, Wayland, Mass. I don't know what it's like now, but it was great then. And I was out visiting them and I twisted my ankle because I had just gotten a Fitbit and I was trying to beat my cousin in steps. So I was doing so much, I twisted my ankle. And so I was laid up in the bed. I was bored. I said, well, if I can't do anything active, maybe I can go see what the schools are like here. And I Googled dyslexia intervention at schools. And one came up, and I wasn't used to seeing private progressive schools have dyslexia intervention. So I emailed them and said, hey, I'd love to come visit your school. And then I realized they didn't know who I was. So I sent in my resume saying, hey, look, I'm a real person. 10 minutes later, they call me back and say, would you like to interview for your job? I said, no, thank you. I live in Boston. I can't do that. And they said, please. We're having a whole retreat in Bodega Bay. You can come. And my aunts were trying to get me to move out here. So they said, go see Bodega Bay. So I went, I hung out with all these great administrators from this private school in Larkspur called Marin Primary and Middle School in the Bay. And then I went back to Massachusetts and they said, hey, we'd love for you to work here. I said, thank you, but I have a life here, etc. And then they had someone else call me and say, hey, we really want you. What's it going to take? I said, oh, I have clients here. I don't know. Don't know if I can do that. And then they had a school call me and say, we will pay for you to move out here. We will wait for you to get here. When can you get here?
Wow.
And everyone in my life back east was like, Jada, you have to do this. And I was like, you're right. I have to, because I wasn't making any money yet, which I'm grateful for. I was very happy, but going from being at a school to just having private clients and paying for everything yourself, it wasn't easy. You know, it was hard. It was exhausting.
Yeah.
And part of what
Yeah.
I encourage teachers, the reason why I was so exhausted, it was hard, is because I wasn't charging enough. I would say the families would be charging enough. You know, private tutoring is not cheap. And I empathize with families a lot, but I do have a highly decent price tag because I know what I need in order to give 10,000%.
Yeah.
You know,
Exactly.
Yeah. And so I moved out here in October of 2016. But after, you know, I said I needed a month to tie things up with my family. They also allowed me. I was on the board at my college at the time. I was at the alumni board. I was the director of the innovation grants. Super exciting. And so they allowed me to still fly out to Boston twice a year to host these events. Oh, that's my cousin. That's my cousin, Carrie Marcel, and out of Virginia.
Thank you, Carrie. Fantastic.
Carrie. And so I was very connected to my Boston families. I'm still very connected to some of them. Very, very connected to the scene in education in Boston still. Very, very, very much so. Very much so. So I worked at this private school in the Bay for 6 years. I'm very close with the learning resource program there still. My boss, Jen Goldman, she was amazing, taught me everything that I need. And she's always encouraging me to say, like, you should go for a director position or something, because I learned from her. Anyways, after 6 years, I felt like I could do all the disrupting I could in this cushy little private school. They know this. This is something I joke with them a lot, but it's not very diverse. Yes, you're not very diverse, Marin Primary, but they let me do a lot there. They let me do a lot. Work with families. I got to do a couple presentations to the entire community about trauma resilience in ourselves as adults, so we can start having those difficult conversations with each other, because it's very hard to have conversations about diversity and inclusion with special needs and differences if we don't know how to receive and look at ourselves. You know, nobody wants to be told, hey, you're doing it wrong. Nobody. And that's another thing. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. No, listen, this is all, it's all amazing. I just, you know, as time is winding down on our episode, I want to make sure we give you a shot at a couple of things, because, I mean, your background's amazing. And first of all, I love the fact that you give accolades to all of your mentors and guides and everything. We're putting up on the screen your Linktree address, and hopefully for folks who are listening in, maybe you'll go into our YouTube channel if you're not seeing this live, and go to Jada's. It's Jada Golden Educator at Large. It's your Linktree address, because you offer to people who are going into special needs education. Yeah, you offer them some curriculum. You offer them some things. I want people to be able to find out what it is that you're doing, and if you we only have a few minutes left, so if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and again, if any teachers or families, I love talking to soon to be teachers about what the best steps are. That's my passion. You know, that's not something I charge. I just love connecting with other teachers like that. But my email address also is just jadagolden@gmail.com. Anyone can reach out to me that way as well. So I have been working for myself so basically the reason why I moved to LA is because I could. That was why. I still have my family in the Bay. It's only a car ride away. I still, this whole year, was doing contract work with my old school in the Bay, doing some diagnostic assessments for gifted and talented students. So that's super fun. That's a passion of mine. I'll be honest, LA is more affordable, more diverse, and warmer than the Bay. Those are the three reasons why I came here. And I've loved it. I've loved it. I live in Inglewood, so I prefer clients that are on the west-south side. However, I met Brian because I do have some families out in Woodland Hills, and I only accepted it because I said, this will lead to something else. You know, I don't know this part. So there was one day a week that I agreed to go work for 3 hours out on that side. And it was great because I met Sean.
Sean. Yeah.
Yeah. And
that's amazing.
Yeah.
But, by the way, honestly, I don't know how you reconcile it, but I'm a native Angelino. So the fact that, you know, the Lakers versus the Celtics, the Dodgers versus the Giants, the Dodgers versus the Red Sox. Yeah, I mean, that's probably an internal challenge.
Constant.
Celtics, right? Celtics, right? I understand, and I completely understand if you guys do prefer the Celtics over any other team.
We don't. Yeah, we don't. But thanks.
Jada, I should probably say this off air, but just this might break your heart. But years ago, I worked in mortgages before getting into financial services. On a business trip, I met the great Sam Jones. We became. I wouldn't even say friends, but we would talk by phone because he's like, let's keep in touch. He went to a Black-owned boarding school in North Carolina that I attended for 1 year in the 80s. We kept in touch. And before Sam passed away, and I attended his online service, and he told me when he got drafted by the Celtics. Now, obviously, he's a diehard Celtic and a legend of the organization. But when he got drafted by the Celtics, his response was, "Damn, I don't want to go to Boston. I want to go to LA."
That's what all the new coming in, the rookies, that's what they all say. No one is trying to go to the Celtics. I understand that. Listen, our fans are not easy. I am very aware. I love Boston, but I am not blinded by the ways that we need to evolve still. That is for
I'm just saying. Sorry, because that's a tough move, Boston to LA.
It is.
Regardless of where it comes from.
I was indoctrinated by the East Coast. My mother said we never go to LA. That's how I thought. And then the first time someone brought me here 2 years ago, he was just like, "Stop hating on LA. Let's go." And as soon as I came here, I was like, "What am I doing anywhere else?" I'm so grateful to be here and all the people and connections I've met, and I don't take advantage of it, and I really want to be able to I want to serve the students here very much so. I'm hopefully going to start doing some volunteer workshops at the library. I don't want to put that out there yet because it's not on paper, but we started talking. I'm very passionate about starting to do some workshops in the community for students.
We've got people to connect.
We have a lot of conversation.
We have a lot of conversation to have offline. Trust us.
Yeah. A lot to do with.
I'm very grateful for all the people that have helped create Jada Golden Educator at Large, and the reason why I am Educator at Large is because of all of the different experience I've had and successes. I do own that title. I do believe I am an educator at large because I do believe that I work just as effectively with 3-year-olds than I do 30-year-olds. I've had that experience, but I'm always looking to learn. I am not an expert in anything. I am experienced, but I guess that's it.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. Well, it's a perfect segue to end the episode. We are going to connect you with a lot of people. Our whole goal in doing this podcast was to create an opportunity to shed a light, spotlight on those people who are doing amazing things for our community and as a resource. And our goal has always been to create a network among those folks that we interact with. We have done a lot of connecting people. And over the last 3 years, we've had the pleasure and luxury of interviewing a lot of great people from across the country and actually outside of the U.S. as well. But we run into a lot of folks in the Southern California area because we both live here. And so we want to help you because we love people who are committed to this community and making a difference for our own children and for our children's children and for the community at large. So Thank you for doing that. Yeah.
The one last thing, though, I want to say to any teacher, anyone that's involved in education, and whether you're admin or teachers, there's one thing that I'm going to push. The CTC, California Teaching Credentials, need much more funding in staff because excellent teachers are not getting their license approved because of silly snafus in the system. And that has to change because it's a complete contradiction to the message out there saying we have a teacher shortage. We have a getting license processed effectively shortage. That's what
in our business, it's the same. Sean's going to ask you a question as we get ready to wrap up this episode. So, wow, look at that. Yes. I see we think in the same lines.
At this point in the show, we asked the question with the following context. Our ability to, and I always say this, but I mean it. I'm really excited to hear what your answer is to this. Our ability to change the world, make it a better place, is tied to our ability or willingness to change ourselves, no matter how great or small. So with that said, give us just one example of a thought or a belief that you once believed very strongly, but no longer believe to be true.
Oh, that I know. Okay.
And there's no wrong answer.
I think I am worthy.
Wow. Okay. It's see again, and that's so simple, but there's so many people that are listening to this, either listening live or after the fact, that, excuse me, that don't realize that or that need that more than anything else. There are people that are tremendously successful,
right,
and famous and known worldwide for the success, but need to be reminded of that very thing right there. That is the most simple and profound answer to that question that I think we've ever had.
I agree.
I
love that.
I have to say it to myself daily, so I know that what
not a bad affirmation to keep.
And you know what? As we try to make the world a better place, I've never thought of this before. That is the purest and most simple thing to aspire to. A world where people need to be reminded that they're worthy a lot less. You know, a world where people need to be
reminded less.
Reminded less. Yes, I'm thinking they are worthy less. A world people need to be less often reminded of how worthy they are.
Yeah.
It's such a universal thing. Yeah.
Great.
Wow. Fantastic.
Well, this has been a great episode. I love the fact that we've covered so much ground, and you're amazing. And I love we're going to be helping you grow this thing here and beyond. And so as we wrap up, let me just say a couple things. Empathy and love. Always, I say this at the end of every episode, is so critical, especially now if you see somebody's situation. I mean, I think the fact that you two met, we don't have to go into that whole story, but that was really an expression of empathy. Knowing that somebody was going through something or some situation that may not have some understanding, rather than be judgmental, have some empathy. You don't know what another person's going through. And if you look at the world through the lenses of love, the world is just a better place. And so with that, again, I want to thank you, Jada. It's been an awesome episode. I'm going to throw it to Sean to wrap us up and close us out and say goodbye to Jada. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jada, thank you so very much. Again, for everyone that's listening, whether you're listening live or after the fact, thank you so much for spending the time with us today. And then make sure there's a link on the screen. I want to thank Billy Footwear as well, who's been a sponsor of the show. They make great adaptive footwear. Make sure that you support them. But then here's the other thing. We also created a men's group known as The Den. That is, men are not encouraged to express emotion, and everybody needs to be reminded that they're not alone. And for those who are fathers or caregivers to someone with special needs, that becomes maybe even twice as important. So the link is on the screen for the registration. If you want to join us, we meet every other Sunday at the 10 a.m. Pacific on Zoom. And just remember, everybody needs the same thing. Everybody needs to be seen, needs to be heard, needs to know that they matter, and needs to know that they're loved. To a certain extent, there is no such thing as special needs. They're only human needs. People might need accommodations in order to get those things, but everybody matters. Everybody within the sound of my voice. Thank you so very much. And if you're listening or watching, we love you.
Thank you, Jada.
Thank you.